Good to go? Okay, we are live. Welcome, audience, board members, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Who's described today? Okay, Laura's described? Okay, good. So, any comments on the agenda? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's go to the action items. As a refresher for the audience, we'll just raise your hand if you want to talk during the meeting. We'll call you up as we go through topics. Laurel?
Well, the only reason I was going to ask is there's nothing that was on the agenda. I just thing on Halloween, and then I had to go. Is that okay?
Come on up.
Can we stop the
I can't hear.
Yeah, I asked him to move on, so he's moving his way down that way.
I can speak up
Can
if
you
need
speak
be.
up? I'm
I'll
sorry.
come in close
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
microphone.
if you don't mind.
No, not at all. So Laurel Rousseau, 709 Bloom Street. At the risk of sounding crazy, I'm going to agree with Mike Nunez on Halloween here. So I wanted to sort of bring up, obviously I've come to the board before on safety issues, on special events or events that clog traffic, and some are organic, like we talked about, from the Christmas lights over on whatever the street is, which I don't think rise to this level. But just kind of looking to see if the town has any issue with the Halloween situation. I was out in it, coming back from work, landing back in town about 8:15 or so. I had to leave my car on Celebration Boulevard and walk home, and even then I was stopped at certain points to allow for traffic over 20 minutes. The traffic was clogged fully. Police officers were out on 192 stopping and scheduling the lights so that the turn-ins to Celebration were slowed down, so 192 became a very nightmarish situation. So I know it's organic, and that's been a conversation as to why maybe nothing can be done. And I think if you stay home and you don't leave your house and you have the luxury of doing that, which not everybody does in town, to be fair, it's a nightmare. I mean, it's truly a nightmare. The trash in the morning, the traffic at night, the safety. I don't know how they would have, even with the police officers at the points that there were, how would an ambulance have gotten through that traffic? Any thoughts on that, or is there kind of, I guess I just want to at least throw it out there for discussion at some point as to whether or not, could there be something that started to, say that essentially, residents only, and ID as you come in, but if you want to park and trick or treat, maybe then in order to offset the cost of that, there's a parking, we do the whole shuttle bus thing. Obviously, we don't want to, on a certain level, encourage it, but it's happening anyway, and to a great cost. I checked with, I was going to ask Town Hall. Town Hall had cleaning crews out in the morning, ran into Russ from CCDD. I think he said he had 6 or 8 people on it. Every year right now, we're looking at our dues going up from CROA to CCDD next year, to various things. And I just think it's a problem to not look at that and say, is there a benefit to the town? Is there a way to curb it, discourage it, slow it, whatever it is? But certainly if for no other reason, the safety reasons, those roads, there has to be some area where internal roads are kept clear, a park here, shuttle in, drop your children. And I will say the police officers, I think if they were, the sheriffs, if they were spoken to, the one that I met at the corner of Celebration Ave and where the Catholic Church is and the terraces, he was out of his mind screaming at people to keep them from crossing the road for safety reasons, because cars were so frustrated. They were trying to make evasive turns and get, okay, how about this side street? Well, every side street was clogged. So he had to literally get very aggressive with people to stop them from crossing at dangerous points. So don't know if anybody else encountered that. If you just stayed home, you probably didn't, but I just wanted to throw that out there. It was over an hour, plus to get home, and then I had to walk back to my car the next morning, et cetera. So anyway, just food for thought. Thank you.
I don't know.
Go ahead, please.
I actually, after Halloween, I sent an email off to the board, and I was actually, I live down in South Village, as you know, and then of course I have the condo downtown, and my parents live downtown as well. I did walk from Croton, where I am, downtown. I thought this year was better than last year, and I think last year was better than the year before. Main Village, I think, will forever be insanity, but I know last year was the first year that Market Street was closed down, not for any reason, just for a safety backup, which helped. And the same happened this year. I think naturally everybody congregates to that area because that's what's familiar. I think this year there are 20-plus police officers. Last year I think we had 13. I know around 4 o'clock, because it was the last day that I had the condo before my tenant took over. So I was going back and forth, and I was stuck in the traffic, just making sure everything was good last minute. So I was going from South Village to downtown nonstop. Parking was insane downtown around 4 o'clock regardless. So I think there's forever things that we can do to improve. Mike, I think last year for Now Snowing, did the parking lot shut it down for residents only. Maybe that's something that we can look into and talk with him for, because there are a lot of people that come from outside of Celebration. It isn't a sanctioned event by anybody. It's going to happen regardless, and I think that's why we worked hard with the sheriff's office to go ahead and say, hey, they're showing up anyhow, can you help out? It's going to happen. I think we actually exchanged emails this morning as well about this. It's going to happen. The two big things, actually, I did take notes. That same intersection that you mentioned, I actually was driving by, and I saw what appeared to be a lost kid on a cell phone standing right by that police officer going ahead. So for that right there, I said, you know what, whatever it costs, whatever the whole thing is, it's worth it for that part. The boulevard was lined up like crazy, went down to World Drive. I don't know, and then the only other thing that I actually had for you directly, did you get any notice regarding the closures around Bloom Street, French Street ahead of time? And I don't even know if CROA had that notice, but
I think I remember seeing something on Service, wasn't?
Just Market.
Just Market,
I
yes.
think because they were gonna then go on and go into the Alfa Romeo show. And I will say, by the time I was home at, not by that point, it's almost 9 o'clock from walking home, downtown was kind of a ghost town. It almost seemed like, wow, nobody's here. It was really the feeder roads, Celebration Boulevard.
They were backed up.
Celebration Avenue, out on 192, coming down Waterside. All of those main routes that you couldn't, there was no way to get around and kind of go, well, I'll just skirt over here and go golf cart forward. There was no skirting anywhere, the lines, and then people started doing a lot of illegal U-turns on the boulevard before they would get to the top so that they didn't have to deal with that, because they were trying to hold traffic to be very, obviously, legally proper, et cetera. So then you started having people who didn't want to wait at the crosswalk, back up several cars so the cops couldn't see them, skirt and dart across the streets. Prior to the cop, it was mayhem, and not really even downtown. By the time I got downtown, you wouldn't have thought anything was going on by 9 o'clock. So.
I think the sheriff's office is definitely learning, just from what I saw last year to this year, and maybe next year they might do one-way streets. I don't know, where it's only one entrance in, one way out. That might help the flow. It's a hard spot.
Mike?
Mike Jackson, 413 Sycamore Street, heart of downtown. Halloween's a big thing for us. We love it. Okay, we go through 3,500 kids, somewhere in that range. We take pictures with the kids, we dress up. I could probably go through 6,000 if we didn't do the pictures, but it's just the way it works. There was a motorcycle cop on Sycamore this year that was doing a great job. And I would encourage you to talk to them about motorcycle cops because they're much more mobile. They can get through in a single lane. We have a single lane in the middle, and he was able to go through and make cars get out of the way and so on. We had a lot of kids. I wouldn't call them mayhem, but we had a lot of people. I mean, we're showing a movie on the side of the house, and the kids are lined up 60, 50 deep down the sidewalk, waiting to get up there. I thought the cops did a good job. Last year they had that trailer they pulled around and they had some people dressed up in it, right? And that was kind of entertaining. I wasn't sure that was a good thing because that just adds to the traffic pulling a trailer around. But motorcycles, I think if you really want to do something to get them around more and have more presence with them, we should have more motorcycles. It was the first time I saw a motorcycle.
They had lots of bicycles, too.
I didn't see the bicycles at all.
Bicycles were out in the side streets.
But this guy he looked like he was positioned on Sycamore because as we were working, I kept watching him go back and forth, up and down, keeping it open and everything. Anyway, I think the opportunity we have to do something for kids that don't necessarily get an opportunity, I think it's a great thing. It's one day out of the year. I know it's frustrating. I understand there's some danger, and thankfully we haven't had an accident or anything yet. But it's really something warm. If you're engaged and involved in it, and you see those kids, and they come back and they show us pictures from 5 years ago and 6 years ago of my wife holding a baby and stuff, they come up and just hand us babies to hold them and stuff. I mean, it's wild. That's one day. And I think, in terms of our humanity and our outreach to our neighbors, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think we can find better ways to manage it, but I would be against trying to suppress it. I just don't think that's a good idea.
We
My
had
opinion.
emails, and I wrote an email to the board this weekend. So I live on Golf Park, and it's lived there for 2 years, and my wife and I were totally unprepared last year, but we were prepared this year. And we handed out 2,500 pieces of candy between 5 and 8:30, and then I went in and watched football. Everybody I dealt with from a child or adult perspective this year was polite and nice. I had no issues from that perspective. Talking to some people, the advantage of Celebration is it's got the reputation of being a nice place to come on Halloween, and I would say 95% of the people we dealt with had the parents and the children, and they like coming to Celebration because it's a safe environment. You don't have gangs, you don't have kids running crazy.
You have sidewalks.
You have sidewalks, and people give out candy, it's polite. That's the advantage. I also said in my email that, on Golf Park, you weren't going anywhere between 6 and 10. I mean, last year, my wife and I thought we were going to hand out candy from 4 to 5:30 and go over to Bond's house and steal his candy, and I made it about halfway to I made it about halfway to Rush Street in 40 minutes, turned around and realized this year we weren't ever going to try that again. So Laurel's comment about, is the street sewed up? Yes, I watch people drive around the streets just dropping off kids and never being able to find a parking space.
I spoke with, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, so I mean, I had sent the email. I mean, clearly we're not going to cancel it. We've tried the sheriff's deputy type stuff. We have tried a lot of safety stuff. Vaughn had made the comment that it would probably be good to do a debrief. Are there safety enhancements we could think about additionally for the future? And that may lead to where you were going to go.
Well, Jerry reached out to me. There were 4 officers on bicycles that went down Spring Park Loop. And he had spoken to me about the security, and they had 4 bicycles riding around town. I don't know how many motorcycles. Obviously, he had the one, and then he said he also had 20 additional deputies doing other things, like traffic control, 20 other, and all this was at the cost of the sheriff, he said. So it didn't come out of any CROA funds. But I agree. I agree with Mike. I love Halloween. I love all the kids coming through. But I also agree with Laurel, because my concern, and I emailed the board this concern, was that if you have a child hit somewhere down in Artisan or wherever it happened, or some kind of a medical emergency or a law enforcement emergency, how are they going to get through? So I think it'd be a good idea if we did meet with the sheriff's department, the fire department, and just kind of maybe do a post-review of what happened and what they feel may be a better way to do this next year. I agree with Kevin, too. It gets better every year, I think. They add deputies. It's a learning lesson, but I think we do need to review this and see if there's something that we can do to alleviate some of that problem.
Just to reinforce the number of deputies, that's correct, around 20 deputies, and they did have 4 to 6, I believe, on bikes that were riding throughout the community. And last year, they had the same number, so they've duplicated that same number from last year. Prior to that, there was a offer of overtime shifts in Celebration, and CROA and CDD were contributing money to help raise that price so that more people would sign up, but they weren't getting many signups. I think that the deputies had better opportunities at local clubs or bars at a higher fee. So now the sheriff's office over the last 2 years has been paying for it in scheduling these deputies to work here. So there has been a higher. Jerry did inform me before Halloween that they weren't going to be doing any time of floats or community outreach type stuff. It was just going to all be strictly work. So no more of the dressing up or putting anybody in the trailer like they did last year. We did have a series of meetings with the Osceola County Fire Department, Sheriff's Department, and traffic engineering from the county to help formulate plans for heavy traffic 4th of July and Halloween, and primarily the lighting of the Christmas tree for now snowing. And so that was the traffic plan that they put in place. And the fire department has assured us over and over again that if they need to get a vehicle, they're getting a vehicle. Whatever means necessary, that the vehicle will get to where it needs to go. And to a point where if they have to stop and travel on foot or travel by other means, that they're prepared to do that. It doesn't hurt to have another follow-up meeting with them just to reinforce that, but they have assured that those vehicles can get where they need to go when they need to get there.
I'm sure they can get there, I'm just wondering how quickly they can get there.
Yeah,
Because
right.
that was my,
The one thing you just actually mentioned is you said between bars and other places that they might do. Last year, I think we had a Wednesday Halloween, this year it's Thursday, next year it's Saturday.
Right.
So the bars do their events on the Saturday of or before, so that's something that we're gonna have to watch for next year.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, I don't think anybody, I wasn't trying to suppress it or stop it. I think I was just really trying to say, in fairness, we've talked a lot in this town about safety and the travel, and I'm not really reassured that they can just get to you one way or the other without there being a concrete, like, how are they going to get to you? Every parking spot along every street was taken. It's not like they could have gone down a side thing, they could have gone through the parking areas, they could go up on the curb because that was packed with people. And again, certain places, maybe in town or Sycamore or Golf Park, were slightly better, but I'm just saying, when you're talking Celebration Ave or Celebration Boulevard, where I spent the majority of my time, you know, if I'd had a heart attack there, you know, I would.
You're 100% correct. I mean,
I wanna just know how-
I'm on
I-
Golf Park, he's on Sycamore. We can tell you it was sewed up. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
just zero
exactly.
argument.
And so you know, I'm just saying, as a resident, I'm looking for really concrete data of how are they, you know, do they have little mobile devices that are 3-wheelers or 4-wheelers that are gonna be able to all-terrain and get up and around things that they would have? I mean, that one cop had all he could do to handle that one. Granted, it's a very big, busy intersection there going down to East Lawn or whatever that is there, correct? So I'm just saying that in certain areas, they might do better at getting to places, but specifically on Celebration Ave and Boulevard, I think it has to be discussed seriously, what would be the response time to get to somebody if a child was hit, had some sort of accident, et cetera, because I didn't see anywhere that they could have zhuzhed a car over to the side and gotten any emergency vehicle shy of a bicycle, maybe a motorcycle. So I agree with you that something like that that's a little bit more flexible of a vehicle that can get through is crucial, but there would be no way a truck would or an ambulance would get down there. So just, you know, for feedback to the community, I just think it would be really great, to whatever extent that is appropriate, to post what are some of those safety follow-ups and what can happen in future, you know, years that would assure people that there's going to be ways to get, you know, security people. I mean,
Not to bring it on, but one idea that comes to mind, Main Village is our biggest traffic area when it comes to Halloween. And Main Village CROA actually owns a couple of parcels that we can kind of deviate traffic around. Maybe next year we need to look at that. You know, not a lot of people recognize that, but you have lands in front of the Presbyterian Church, right at Celebration Avenue. The first 20 or 30 feet is actually owned by CROA. And the same up on Golf Park. There's a lot of cutoffs that TCC put in, and why they did things certain ways, I don't know, but this is something that we can actually use to our benefit, to have a safety plan to allow more people walking in the streets there and plan for that. So that might be
And-
something next year to look into.
also, if I recall, didn't Mike Nunez, in response to some of our concerns on now snowing, actually put one or two points where the
Sycamore.
fire and rescue sat there and waited type of thing? So that would be the other thing. Could there be 2 or 3 of those mobile units just in place?
I have a brave volunteer right here to my left who has agreed that he will take the lead on the Halloween follow-up.
Great.
And I'm really thinking about it from a traffic,
Exact,
sheriff,
safety,
type thing.
yep.
Work with Steve. Another board member wants to join him. Please raise your hand.
I have contact information from the last.
Okay, is that fair? And Laurel, you're not the only person to bring it up, so it's a very fair topic. I had debated whether we should do it today or the board meeting. I had said board meeting, but we did it today. But it's on the agenda. Okay. Anything else? Board use of social media. Let's go to that topic. This is going to be a free-form conversation for the board. We have the front porch, which is the town hall. We have the back porch, which is the Wild West. You could probably steer this even a little bit more towards communication protocols. and we've had, well, just be perfectly honest. You dive into the back porch, God help you, you know, social media, everybody who deals with it knows it goes in a million different directions. You know, sometimes a fact or two will even get thrown in, but usually not. So the reason for this conversation was a wide open board conversation about what should our structure and policy be. We had set it up not at the beginning of this year, but at the beginning of last year, where the secretary was actually going to do responses, and I think we had talked about social media. We had certainly talked about public emails and stuff like that. So if we're going to talk about this again, let's just talk about, now that we're wiser, every person on this board, with the exception of Mary Ann, has been here now for almost 2 years at least. So what are thoughts? And I don't want to lead, actually just want to listen a little versus being the driver on this one, but what do people think about how we should handle that?
Well, I guess I can be the guinea pig to start this conversation. When I was on the board last time, the social media was active, but I don't think quite, there was, at least with regards to board participation, it was minimal, other than when you had somebody that would tag you in a Facebook post, hey Vanessa, or hey whoever, which happens now. After my tenure on the last after the two terms, or 2 years, I went totally off of social media because I found I was being tagged constantly as the fact check. Can you please tell us this, tell us that? I don't believe as a board member that it should be, that we should be the fact check on a non-sanctioned CROA device. So that meaning front porch, that would be if we had our own social media or our own, which we do have our own Facebook page, things like that. So if we're responding on something, our communication as a board, given the one voice message, should be on meetings, workshops, front porch. It can be on a forum. But if it's not something that CROA can actually legitimate the facts, when we're on the back porch and we're on somebody else's site, we as a board can't control whether something is being posted as true or false. As you know, there are numerous times when you read something on social media, it's not accurate. If it's not our site or something that we control, we can't correct the information. So that's my concern. That said, I also don't want to ignore when somebody is, hey, here's this situation, you know, can you respond? I think as a solution to this, and I've mentioned this to the board before, is cite a part in the meeting. See meeting number or workshop number, whatever, if there was a fact that was discussed, or have a link to the CROA correct information. So I guess I'm not saying we don't want to respond, but I'm saying we want to respond in a CROA sanctioned, because we're CROA board. That's my 2 cents and then some.
I thought as a
Yes.
board that we were going to, I thought we had agreed that residents should be directed first to town hall to get answers, and that if town hall needed more direction, they would come to the board. Does anybody else remember that? I didn't think we were responding to social media or the front porch. I thought it was to be addressed first by town hall, and then if they can answer the questions, then great, and if not, if the satisfaction isn't there in the answer, then that town hall could come, or Steve could come to the board via an email to one voice here, and then see if we can resolve it. But I don't,
I think you do want to direct questions to the operations arm, so you do want to direct them to town hall when at all possible. I think the slippery slope, I find this because in my position, people tag me all the time as the CEO of the organization, hey, I don't want to ask 52 other people, I'm going to go straight to you on social media. That's dangerous. Let's be honest, we don't always have the correct answer in our head. It is dangerous to opine on social media when you are a board member or an executive of an organization, because, well, it's the can of worms. So I think that referring to town hall, as well as putting in, as Vanessa said, information on this is available, review this, whatever, where you're putting them somewhere where they're going to be able to see the factual meeting or the facts in writing, and then, come to their own opinion based on the facts placed before them. I think those are really the two options, whereas where you really do want to direct public question to the operations end of things and not respond as the governance body unless it is a governance question. If it's a governance question, then us responding saying, well, that matter can be found in the bylaws here, where you're not opining, you're not saying this is what I believe it says, let me check, or let me go find that out for you. You're basically saying, here is where you can find that answer in writing or in video. Or, this answer, please contact town hall, they're the operational experts.
I don't want to micromanage town hall.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this
That's
before, micromanaging their.
You need to push
them,
operations
and they
to
should be.
operations.
That's what they get paid to do, and I just think we're spreading ourselves too thin here. I mean, we got enough to do as it is. We should be handling the major decisions where each of us are only one voice, but town hall is one voice for town hall. And if it doesn't get settled there, then, come to the board, but it's just too much.
What about the front porch? What do you guys do with the front porch? Do you monitor everything that gets posted on there?
We have a staff member that monitors it and sends questions to the appropriate departments to respond to. It's really low traffic lately. I haven't had that many questions on there. And there's one particular area that says for board question and comments, because it's so many categories for us to go through each one. It's time consuming. And I think it comes down to highest and best use of time. So we had board of directors a few years back that gave direction to management that will respond to the board questions and comments section of that form.
I know I've missed that a couple times, just as a side note. I have gotten, I don't go on very often, which I think as a board, we need to decide how we want to handle that. Because I do know that when I've gone back on there, there's been a posting, hey, Vanessa, can you? I'm like, oh, whoops.
Well,
and it is a CROA sanction, so I'm guilty of that too, of forgetting to check it. So perhaps we can kind of link that into our protocol somehow.
So let me just throw out something as a question and a comment. We all have spouses who probably check the back porch for us.
Not
So
my
if-
husband.
so if-
Just so you know. I would be the exception to that.
I want to be clear, Brian, that's actually not true.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's not, maybe it's not. Okay.
No, I mean, let's not do that.
Okay. Some of us do.
Some of you do.
Some of us. And some of us even check it ourselves. I'll say I do that. I suspect Kevin does that. If we're not, so if the back porch is the Wild West and we can't control it, then our response maybe there should be that as board members, we're going to respond to comments on the front porch. If the front porch is a CROA.
Front porch meaning for the forum, meaning our forum, correct?
We
Okay.
have the front porch, which is a Facebook front porch. I mean, it's there. So I mean,
No.
well, it's not Facebook, but it's
It's just a chat room.
It's just a chat room, but yeah.
Yeah, it's this-
I agree, but
Is the front porch?
either we
maybe,
respond to that or we, at least we have to monitor that. We have to have, we can't just do nothing because we've done something in the past. We're gonna look like idiots and certain people are gonna get called out quickly. Kevin and me being two up, people do call you out. I mean, I have a really.
And your response is, as far as at least in my perception is, if you have something you want brought to the attention of the board, here are the board emails. Or something to that nature. There is no right answer that anybody can ever give, because there are two opinions that you'll never, even when you give facts, you still have somebody that will argue with you. It just happens. I'm sorry, David, I didn't mean to interrupt your hand.
couple of thoughts. I know that the formal agenda item is board use of social media. To me, it's board and management use of social media. To me, it's broadening the issue of social media. I view social media as a reality. It's out there. Many people rely on social media. I have even seen a print ad. I mentioned this to you last week. I saw a print ad that Facebook is now going to be a news organization and give you all the news you need. Social media is a reality. Many people rely on it. There is a lot of misinformation, but people believe it. It's also, in my view, our back porch is extremely toxic and has caused some people to say, maybe I don't want to live here because of what I'm reading. I also know that many people on that back porch are not residents here. So, and then so I go to what can we do as a governing organization and as management, or pseudo-governing. I know we're not officially governing. To me, there's a, I don't want to have us have an ostrich in the sand. I think it's ostrich that goes in the sand. Or is it
It is, yes.
or some
Ostrich.
animal.
Yeah, I call my daughter the ostrich all the time.
Yeah, but forget this. So I don't want us to be the ostrich, but I also think it's dangerous for us to engage, because I think, as you said, Marianne, you know, if you start to go there, it will likely be misinterpreted and misconstrued, because there are some people who don't have our best interests as a community in mind. So I think of a couple things. I think the broad question is, how do we address and try to redirect? I think Vanessa, you said it right out of the gate. We need to be official and redirect to official communications channels. And it may be that it's not the secretary or the president or executive director, but maybe there's a neutral person, a non-person. It's called celebration management or celebration leadership or something that is responding. So that is the response. And it says redirect, you know, here's where you find it in the bylaws, here's where you find the answer. That's actually a CDD question. That really is for the sheriff. And it's factual, it's redirect, it's not emotional. We don't get social in social media. We just redirect and try to, well, and I do think that we, as an organization, as CROA leadership, and as management, are communicating, and we're trying to communicate better. And as we communicate better, maybe that can help dry up some of the negative statements, because, you know, it won't, but we can try it. I know the Pollyanna. But I think we have to stay official.
I have a couple, just in your response, because I want to follow up, but before I do so, could you touch on CROA's policy as well?
Sure. So the Facebook page that's considered the back porch is a private group that's run by a resident. That resident has posted a disclaimer when you first log on to that page that says this is an unofficial CROA page. If you want official answers, go to one of the CROA communication mediums, and it's through Friday Flash, Front Porch. We all know there are the board meetings. So it's listed on there. As a suggestion, would it be possible that those that are communicating on that page, because for management to be part of it, we'd have to use our personal accounts to be part of it. And, you know, my account has pictures of my dog and my kids on there, and that's not something I want on that page.
We don't want management on there. Some of them just go nuts for.
So if there's something that's a hot topic on there as a best practice, why can't it just be just simple communication to say this will be suggested as a workshop topic, and just bring it back to the workshop, where it's an open forum where people can come sit at the table and communicate that in an official public venue.
There are some topics that I would never discuss ever in a workshop,
So
because
some of
it's
them
not
just ignore.
something that's productive. Thanks, Mike. It's not something that is in the best interest of the board's time, but also in best interest of celebration. Let's face it, sometimes they're tagging you on toxic items that we don't even need to be involved in. I can honestly say that eventually somebody will reach out by a legitimate form and say, hey, Brian, Vanessa, Kevin, whoever, board, can you please get us an official answer? When it's a legitimate question, it really does come back to the board, and we've workshopped it. I can't think of a specific item that has been serious to celebration that has been on the back porch that hasn't been eventually discussed. We get the information, but we don't need to engage in that toxicity.
Right.
Kevin, you had comments first. Go ahead.
Did you want to comment on Canoa's policy?
Canoa's policy is pretty much the same. We're not responding on Facebook.
And their board?
Because we don't have a entity that's part of that group.
And how are Canoa board members?
I don't think anybody's ever responded.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mike Nunez often gets into heated debates with individuals, so that's why I was looking into that
that's
question.
another reason to
because he
not do
often
it.
has those heated debates with people. I don't see him because I'm blocked.
Yeah.
But anyhow, a couple of comments that we have here, and we actually all touched on this briefly before.
Kevin, listen.
Well, no, let's
Okay,
let's give it
okay,
a-
I'm sorry. I just didn't know if you were recapping, I'm sorry.
No, I haven't commented at all yet. So we've all touched on it briefly, and it has been historical that since that page was made by whoever, even when you were on the board before, you would comment on it. Eric would often comment on it. The community references that page. This board, I can't think of a single meeting that we have not referenced the back porch. So because of that, we can't just say, that's it, we're ignoring it, we're not going to know the pulse of the community anymore. I've said it from the time I came on this board. I've been asking for support of this board to ask management to be involved. Now, I understand what Steve's comment is, a private account, he's uncomfortable with that. I agree with that entirely. I've said this again to this board, so it's a repeat, but for the record, you have Disney annual pass holder pages that are not sanctioned by Disney, but the company is on the page as a company page to correct mistruths or to guide to a link or what have you. Universal does the same exact thing. And they have the page is Universal Orlando, and they will comment as that. It is possible, and we have a communications director here, that could turn around and the Celebration Town Hall page can actually make those comments. It is possible. And I'm not saying to get into debates, and this could actually be a CJC item because it would eliminate the Canoa board from having these communications as well. And it could be simple and say, here is the link, here is the meeting date, here is the event. I'm not saying to get into Q&A. If they have something further, comment one could be a generic with a link, a video, whatever. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have time to go ahead and watch a video, find 38 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's where you can go ahead and watch the answer to your question. That's not realistic. Management can go ahead and say, this would be, we know, based on our minutes, this is the meeting it is, here's the link to the meeting if you'd like to go ahead and refresh yourself. If it's not in there, we can go ahead and bring this topic to the board. It goes to board president, vice president, whoever it is. They decide if it's going to go onto an agenda or if it's going to be tabled until another time when it's available. But to ignore it is equally dangerous. So I am going to look to management to speak with other communities. We had Nicole in from CCMC last year in December. She came in from CCMC, she's their social media person, or communications, corporate communications, and she gave some feedback. And I talked to her after the meeting, and she said, oh yeah, this is something that we do in many communities. We can go ahead and set something up here. But then nobody's continued that conversation. And we're all at fault for that, except you two, because you guys weren't here. But it is something that generationally, Facebook, those types of group chats, that's the way of not the future, that's the present. That's where we are. So like it or hate it, mistruths happen on the news, on whatever channel you watch, and they're going to happen on Facebook as well. They're going to happen in just conversations, but we cannot ignore it. So I'm all for addressing it and finding a proper way as a board. I think as a board and individually are going to be two separate topics, but as a board, I think we do need to address it, and we need to address it swiftly.
I would echo Kevin's very last comment that individually and as a board are two separate items. Individually, I do not participate in Facebook social media. I own businesses that have Facebook pages and I have thousands and thousands of Facebook and Twitter followers. I do a lot of work in social media. I do not have membership in the Facebook back porch, the Facebook front porch, the Facebook better than the front porch, the Facebook save our town from the bad guys, the Facebook, we love celebration, the Facebook we're renting our home in celebration, and on and on and on. But as a board, I think it is important for us to have a presence. And so I'd like to propose a compromise, which is this. In the transactions that I've seen copies of that have been given to us, it is confusing as to whether or not Kevin or Brian, who are the two most active posters in the Facebook back porch, are posting as individuals or as board members. Sometimes it's obvious that Kevin's talking as the secretary, sometimes it's obvious that Brian's talking as the president, sometimes it's not obvious either way. I'd like to ask that if there is a post that any board member wants to make on the back porch as a board member, that they would send an email to the rest of the board saying, here's the issue and here is my response that I intend to post. Is this an acceptable post as a board member or for the board? If you don't want to do that and you want to post as an individual, then I would only ask that you say, this is Jackson Mummy on the back porch posting as an individual and not as a CROA board member, so that at least at that level it's clear that you're writing for yourself. Because I think that it's way too easy to blur those lines and to ask, is every post that somebody makes on social media a post as a CROA board member? I posted, or I made a video last year about the county money. I put a written disclaimer that said I was speaking as a CROA board member for myself only, and I put it into the video as well. Other people posted that on social media. I did not post it because I don't have an account. But at least it was clear that I was talking in my capacity about my vote that I was taking as a CROA board member. And I think if we're not that explicit about what we're doing, then we are just asking for more confusion, more difficulty, more rumor mill about all sorts of things. So that's my suggestion about how we can have a presence but also be more controlled about what we say and do.
Other comments?
I guess just as a follow-up to what you were saying, Jackson, my only concern is that typically, if indeed you are tagged, it's typically because they want to know what you think as a board member. They're reaching out because they want the facts or their spin of what they want you to agree to. So that's typically what ends up happening. And so that's my only caveat to this. We did, whenever we responded anything on Facebook, when I was on the board last time, either Facebook or by email, we usually would send it out to everybody, to the board. Here's the question, here's this. Is there any feedback? And then we would do a one voice response back to that particular person. And it would be the board responding rather than that individual. So that was one of the policies that we set up when I was on the board last time. So it looks like Eileen had something.
Yep. Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. The front porch, personal opinion, it got murdered. Okay, it's gone. So maybe it's time to take a look at that. It probably can't be resurrected because the world has moved on. Maybe it is time to embrace Facebook. And I'm going to speak from a sort of partisan point of view, having worked with Gary, who's just worked his heart out on the charter review. One of the things you're going to be talking about later are the task force amendment voting plan. One of my greatest fears is that the problem with what you see on Facebook is you can have 100 comments, and as it goes on, it starts to spin out of control. It really becomes a conspiracy. You have no idea what anybody's talking about. And yes, if you don't interfere somewhere, or at least as Marianne says, point to actual fact. And this is going to be quite a problem when we get to the amendments, where there's, at the moment, about 41-ish or so, 40-ish or so, close, something like that. And you don't want to see, when you're talking about the voting plan, the whole program being in jeopardy because somebody picks out one or two or three things, they're spinning it off, and there's no answer. Maybe, and here's just a suggestion, maybe either on the front porch or on a Facebook page, we actually have a charter review. Everything that has been done has been documented, has a reason. Every amendment that you're going to put out there has a story behind it on why the board is supporting it. And maybe this is the time to talk about embracing the devil, opening a Facebook page that deals maybe just with the charter review, an official celebration, CROA Facebook page. See how that goes. See if there's a way of, okay, Brian wants to say something.
No, go ahead, I'm listening.
Okay, I think we're at the end, that, who actually responds, I don't know. I personally think it might be staff, because a lot of it's factual, a lot of it is, as I said, every decision has been discussed, has a reason behind it, why it's going to the voters.
I really, just stay there for a second. I really like what she said, because it kind of, sometimes you need, I don't post often, but the one time I jumped in was when probably a month ago, when a former board member said that $320,000 had just disappeared from the budget, and then you had a string going, who stole the 320? And then I had to remind the former board member that the year before we had it wasn't 320, it was 310, and we'd taken the 310 down to 140 the year before, and that the former board member had voted for it, and it was because of the athletic fields. And then we took it the rest of the way down, which then resulted in a bunch of people accusing the former board member of things. But and I get Vanessa smiling and Kevin's nodding his head yes, because Kevin also has jumped in. You know, sometimes, and the charter is an excellent thing, because there's a couple, 3 things in the charter where we've tried to do God's work, and they're going to be controversial regardless. And I could just see somebody going to town. And if you let the back porch go to hell in a handbag with no response, or go talk to CCMC, I really worry that's just throwing gasoline on a fire and asking for stuff to not burn. And that's what I struggle with. Which is when I usually jump in, it's when it's just something is so blatantly wrong, it needs to be said. It's just blatantly wrong.
So with Facebook, there is the difference between a public group, which is just out there for anybody to see, and a private group, which is what you have right now, which is you have to ask permission from the administrator of that page to even be part of that group. So as you guys are having this discussion and coming up with direction for management on which way to go, I have seen other leaders in town communicate on, before it was a private page, now it's a public page, and their one response led to 20 people questioning their one response, and then them trying to answer all 20. So it's a slippery slope at that point. So I think if you're going to do it, we had a public page, and the public page is really content distribution to put your best foot forward. This is the good side of celebration. These are the great things that are taking place in town. I would severely caution against allowing any type of dialogue on that page. If you're going to do public, that's a whole different logistical issue, and we're going to really need to talk about staffing when we do that, because you're going to have to get approvals. We're going to have to vet them, make sure that they're residents in good standing, all of those types of things. So there's some logistical questions that we're going to need to work through as we make those decisions.
Do we know who the administrator of the back porch is?
I do.
Yeah.
Because I would actually really like to talk to them about what their metrics are showing, because what my experience has been is, you are correct, social media is a phenomenon, it's a way that, but the people who tend to stir social media pots and respond, we're very, very reactive to about 25 people out of 8,000. I think that is also something that has to be understood and put on the table. That's been my experience with our business, is when we get so reactive, instead of being proactive, I think establishing a page like what you're talking about, and yes, it'll take monitoring, is an important way to, I don't know, I get told what's on back porch. I do not participate in that. But I think just having a really clear, what we kind of started the conversation with, is an overall communications protocol that includes guidelines for board participation and staff participation in social media within the legalities, because you can't tell an individual what to do in their social media, is just the way we need to go, and make it very simple and clear and stick to the facts.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't have any intention of limiting anyone's First Amendment rights to say any crazy piece of garbage that they want. I read it on Facebook, it's true. You know, you can do that. But when you're speaking as a board member, then you are speaking for me by implication. And I deserve the right to know before you post on Facebook what it is that you're saying. And if I object or disagree, you should know that before you post. It may not stop you from posting, but you should at least know that. I think that's just a courtesy that we should ask of each other. And if we can't even get that courtesy, if we're going to have people post because in the urgency of the moment they have to post a response, then I think that's wrong. I think we're missing out. If we're really trying to have a reasoned discourse with the facts, let's at least take a few minutes to send an email to the other board members and say, this got posted, I would like to respond as whatever my capacity is, an officer of the board, and I just want you to know that this is going to be my response. I mean, would that be a problem for you, Kevin?
No, it's not. But with all due respect, this board can't do that with emails currently. This board cannot email everybody on the same comment, the same topic. So to go ahead and request something further is intriguing.
Why are we allowing that social media group to put it on the board? Why don't we put it back on them, let them appoint somebody in their group when the questions come up to make a contact with town hall, rather than coming to expect individual board members and create all this extra work here. Let them appoint somebody on their group and have them be the designated one voice to go to town hall on issues, rather than us trying to manage it.
We don't have that jurisdiction.
We're describing an absolute, I mean, part of the purpose of this conversation is to show how impossible it is. We're trying to put something in a box that will never go in a box. The odds of sending an email and getting a response and replying to social media 3 days later after it has blown up doesn't work. I would be perfectly comfortable. I mean, so there are times when I know people have had wine on Friday night and they're just out there in need of a response because they're not telling the truth. I would rather have a board standard that says going forward, we say, hi, I'm Brian Kinsel and I may happen to be on CROA, but I'm responding for myself. Your facts are wrong. And I'm fine with that as a protocol. There was an incident this weekend where a woman made a copy and Zelmansky had to take it down because people just went nuts and people just go out of control on there. And it, you know, it's the way social media works, and putting it in a box will never work.
So
I just wanted to do a follow-up question, because I see, I made a comment that may be going the way Facebook comments, which is what happens. I mean, maybe consider the alternative that you do try to put it back on the front porch. And I'm now speaking just specifically about the charter review, because I can't deal with the rest of the world. And perhaps it's a way of seeing if the official forum is really dead, or when there's something of interest, can you put in a new topic either as part of the forum or as separate that says this is going to be the official, now I have Steve like this big, the official page to discuss the information about the charter, and the only thing you put on all the other 7, the lanai, the backyard, the barbecue, whatever, is simply, please refer to the official
Yeah,
discussion.
in part because the charter is a CROA members-only topic.
Correct.
You can't even vote on the charter unless you're a member, but you can be on the Facebook back porch or lanai or front porch and not even live in Celebration, much less be a CROA member. So there's a very different set of sensibilities about it. And so I think it's useful, what you're saying, Eileen, I think it's very useful for the purposes of the charter to go to our CROA front porch, I mean, to be clear.
I think it's a great idea to put it on the front porch as its own section. It can have its own thread, and then any Friday Flash, any type of Facebook that we post will all point back to this front porch, which requires a member login to go in there and do it, and then we can monitor that specifically to get answers back to any questions that have come from that. And then those folks that are individuals that are on Facebook, that want to copy the links from the from the Friday Flashes and put them on there to give accurate information on that site, I think that that's much needed in the Wild West of
And
communication.
in the Wild West, if something happens, we can point people to the front porch for the charter and say if there's a question that hasn't been addressed there, we'll make sure it gets addressed next business day. Kevin? you got something?
I don't think we're going to resolve anything today, but we do have management as experts, and I would go ahead and encourage us to have management reach out to Nicole from corporate communications and see what they experience in other communities. I will say Celebration is not unique or special in this aspect of our Facebook page. In fact, I'm part of one that's where I'm from, and I'm actually very grateful that we don't curse and use a profanity down here that I see on the pages up there. So we're angels in comparison, believe it or not. But the comments are the same. It's either about the parking, the restaurants. It's hysterical because I literally am on, wait, what community am I part of right now? Because it's the same complaints. It's just the way things are going, good and bad. I will say, however, if we can go ahead and speak with CCMC Corporate Communications, see how that works there. For my job myself, I mean, we have a group that there's a social media policy. You have to be part of that work group to be on there. And there's those rules. And if you're not there, it's out. If the comment is answered, the comments get closed and people can't keep running on.
Perfect.
That's where we
can
need to go. So
can
CCMC Corporate Communications.
We've given this 45 minutes. Can we agree that if any of us are going to post on the back porch as regards to a CROA-related item, we will say we're responding as an individual and not on behalf of the board?
I'd say it's obvious because it's in the details of that page. Because it's not a CROA page. It says it in that profile.
But everybody knows we're CROA board members.
Yeah,
I'm
and the
not-
problem is.
You and I are getting tagged.
The problem
very
is, it's
specifically.
like, you're getting tagged because you're CROA board members. You're getting tagged because you're CROA board members. You can say, I'm responding as a personal, for my personal vote, or my personal opinion on the board, I cannot speak for the board. Do something like that, so they understand that it is your view, your opinion, and it is not something that is representative of the entire board. If it is something we've discussed, and they want the full view of the board, you can say it was discussed in a workshop, it was discussed at a board, and then the specific.
I understand where you're coming from on this. I don't know, we're all looking at it differently. I know that you mentioned there was a comment that something came up, and nothing jived, nothing made sense. So I think we can go to corporate and see what their experience is in other communities. I think we all have acknowledged that the back porch is not an official CROA page, and I think that this board should stop referring to the back porch in any capacity if we want to go ahead and turn a blind eye to it. I hear what you're saying, but because you don't want to be part of it, formerly you were part of it, as an example, and you never said those types of things. And when you removed yourself from it, although all of your comments are gone, if you search your name, you see every question that's been asked to you. So I'm trying to see how we can go to our partner, our vendor, to see how this is working in other communities before we just jump to it.
I think
That's
Steve's already written it down. I
where
think
we're
we
going.
should do that.
I guess, but I'm still, I still think that there are several board members here. I don't want to speak for myself, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think there are several of us that want to make sure that your representation on there is yours, not the board's.
If I respond, from this point forward, I will say that it is Brian Kinsel responding on its own behalf. I will just commit to do that. Because I'm getting tagged because I'm president. So
Right.
sometimes if something is just wrong, I'm going to respond because I feel like letting incorrect statements linger is even worse than responding. Yes, sir.
Steve Northridge, 1130 Tapestry Drive. One recommendation would be for social media when you're posting, don't put it actually in the post, but put it on your profile. So if you have a Facebook profile, say, although I'm a member of CROA board, any comments I make on this are not representative of CROA. I'm represented as an individual. So it's in your profile. So anytime you comment on social media, it goes back to your profile. That's the way, when I worked at Oracle, that's what we always did. We had a Twitter profile. I had to put that in my Twitter profile. Even in the fact, a lot of times I was doing stuff for work. So that's just a suggestion you could do to avoid this, having to discern what you're doing. Essentially, anything you make on social media really shouldn't be social, in my opinion.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Is there anything else critical on this topic? Because I'd like to wrap it, because we have an hour to go and a lot of items to get through. Anything else? Good to close? It's in your court to talk to Nicole and come back to us as a group. Okay, item number 2. Motion to approve 2020 CROA budget with net revenues and expenditures of $4,871,216. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second is Mary Ann. Okay. Any comments on the budget from anybody?
Question, any changes from our last big discussion on this?
Brian, do you mind if I just frame it real quickly for those that are watching at home? So the CROA budget process began around June, and the board's met several times over the past few months. It started with discussion on level of service, where the board reached consensus on direction that they wanted management to look at for how we were going to run the community over the next year. Management team then took those budgets, divided them out amongst the departments. Each department had built a budget for 2020, brought it back to myself and Susan, reviewed it with us. I asked questions to the best of my ability of how a board member would ask. Really wanted to kind of look deeply into how these budgets were being built from a zero-based perspective to meet that level of service. Then the budget was presented to the board in September. I believe September 16th was the budget work session. It was a full-day work session. Many back-and-forth conversations on each one of the items, some big-picture items, and direction back to management. Those were adjusted and then brought back, I believe, in early October during a workshop for a second round of discussions. Those adjustments have been made, sent back out to the entire board, and there's been no changes since that point. So the budget that you see here in front of you was sent to the entire community for feedback. Questions were given to the board during my weekly updates. So the board has all the information from the last meeting, and again, no changes to this.
It's good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Couple comments on my part. Lifeguards are eliminated in this budget. I heard a little bit of scuttlebutt, but I've not heard a lot. The opinion of the board, also just make sure we get it recorded, is we either need to do no lifeguards or we need to do all lifeguards with a whole different set of rules. And we went with this recommendation. I've had very little feedback there. This has Island Village in here, recording plats. In here, we did February, I think May and December of next year. David and I were in a meeting with Island Village last week, sorry. They are still proceeding. Game plan is real. They've spent $16 million, as we've said on the next thing. So they are moving fast regardless of what's happening with the school. So is there a risk with Island Village that February, they think they're going to do it in January. Could it happen in March? Yes, it could happen in March. Would it be a huge Freudian slip in our budget? No. We've got $1.5 million in cash. We've got that type of flexibility. From a perspective, we know the big ticket item in here was the athletic complex. We've all talked about that. From a capital funds perspective, the real numbers is it was $310,000. That was the old 851 mortgage. Last year it was $115,000 in the budget. This year it is zero. So we have taken that $310,000 that was the mortgage on this building. We've taken it into operations because that's really helping fund the athletic fields and everything else that's been going on with the assets we have been deploying. The rest of this, you know the story, you've heard the story. It's pretty straightforward. It's an increase of 2.8%. I think, all things considered, it's a pretty good budget. Second thing we have in here will be the approval of the CJC budget. I don't know if you ever spoke with Paige or not.
Yeah.
You have, okay, Just give us an update on your conversation with Paige.
Spoke with Paige regarding the canoa contribution to CJC budget and some of the increases in canoa. They came out to about a 6% increase, and there's a per acreage increase. And Paige had a general understanding of that budget. That mailing went out to all the canoa owners, and I've received zero response from anybody regarding that increase.
It is a risk item, although the increase to CJC was, or to canoa was 54,000 versus our 162. If somebody screamed and they went up 45,000, it would be a $7,000 difference or something like that. We're still in good shape there, but that's
Right.
actually a good update.
And I provided some, just some background, some knowledge on why some of the staff were moved from CROA to CJC and those types of things to Paige, so we understood the increase.
So this is item 2. Item 3 is CJC. It is my recommendation as president and assistant treasurer that we approve both of them, but we'll do number 3 next.
Brian, can I just have one more
Yeah,
statement to that? Everything that I described for the process for CROA, that same process took place for CJC. So when we work on the CROA budget, the CROA board typically drives the conversation for the CJC budget also.
I just wanted to, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted, first of all, I want to thank you as the assistant volunteer treasurer, but I know it was the treasurer that really did all this. But I want to point out 2 areas that I think potentially we've got to keep our eye on over the next year. One is the complex, the CCFC. It's becoming increasingly clear that we are going to need to acquire more supplies, more materials, potentially some buildings to store materials. We're going to have to rethink some of the work that we're doing in the way that we're maintaining the fields. I don't know that any of this was necessarily knowable in advance, but it is becoming clear as usage is occurring, as we're getting real-time activity, that there are potential challenges, and those are going to cost money. Along with that is going to come staffing questions about the right level of staffing, higher, lower, different capacities, different capabilities, and that also is an unknown at this moment. And then to counterbalance that is the unknown of revenue. It's not clear to me yet that we have a model for revenue at the complex that we can budget with confidence. We've got some numbers. We've done our best estimates. I appreciate the work that Steve and Nikki and others and the Recreation Committee certainly have done to try and anticipate this. But I think our Island Village numbers are more set in stone than our revenue from the complex. And so I just want to make clear that while we'll approve this budget, I think, today, we should be very aware that we may have to make alterations because of this item. It is a big, big item.
I wanted to extrapolate a little more on the lifeguard comment, because I know that a lot of the group that you've spoken with, it has not been a big issue. However, it has been a big issue if you have young kids. So a lot of the people that I've interacted with have just reached out just to get clarification with regards to the lifeguards. They see it as a small item in the budget. We see it as a very large risk for liability. So, I think it's important that as we talk about lifeguards, it really isn't an issue with regards to what we have to cover. But it is based upon what's going on throughout other states. The litigation and the liability, as soon as you hire a lifeguard for anything within the regular daily business of the association, we assume risk. By just saying, we are not assuming that risk, we're not gonna have a lifeguard, have your own, that was the advice that was given to us by our insurance company and by our attorney. So it is not because we are trying to save $24,000 or whatever, nominal amount. But the opposite end of that is we would have to Brian's point, we would have to then hire a lifeguard for every pool from the moment we open to the moment we close. Not only that, if we go to that extreme, we then really accept liability because we have our staff there. So we would have to go with an independent company that is not affiliated with CROA to assume that liability. which is therefore that much more expensive. So it's not even gonna be our lifeguards, it's gonna be an independent company that's doing it. So it really is, it's an issue of making sure that we're protecting the association, not that we don't want to have high school kids working in our lifeguards. So I think it's important just to make that distinction, that it's really is in the best interest of the association, based upon insurance company and legal representation, that we do not have lifeguards.
Well, you said 20-something. It was actually 55,000 for partial coverage, and their recommendation is you either are 100% in, across the board, all hours are open, which, like, I have a condo in Maryland, and Maryland by law makes you do that, or else you don't be in. So it's either 0 or 100. It's nowhere in between. And
We can put those, we can do lifeguards, it's just matter if the residents wanna pay for it. I mean,
Yeah.
we pay 55,000 for part-time at Lakeside, I think, and just Lakeside, is it?
Lakeside,
So just Lakeside, you pay part-time, 55,000, so we have, what, 5 pools? I think 5 pools, what would it run?
I believe it was
for
estimated
full-time?
close to 300,
we haven't
350,000.
priced it, but it's a real, we didn't price it, but it would be a real number, and it's just a question of how you choose to go down one path.
So I have 2 quick comments, just to make sure we have signs ordered for no lifeguard on duty, for sure, to
We
be
have
in
them
place by
south.
January 1st.
Right, this would
I
be
just-
for January 1st.
Just to make sure confirmation they are in place. I don't know if we should put a message out starting in December as an FYI, so that way we can cover our behinds. It's been informed and communicated.
Do you mind, Kevin, if I add a very real possibility to that comment? There could be, once the word gets out, lifeguards quitting, and it doesn't make sense for us to hire new lifeguards in at this point in time for November and December. So there's a very good possibility that the lifeguarding hours at Lakeside may have to be reduced over the last 2 months of the
We
year.
should
I
start
hear
communicating
that.
and
I
have
think
a
we need
whole
to start
transition.
communicating it though, and no lifeguards finding a job in the winter. That's when all the water parks are shutting down.
Well,
And
we're looking
we're
to
in slow
try and
season, so-
move as many as we can into park monitor positions, so that would at least help a little bit, but
Yeah,
we're gonna
that's-
lose some people.
I think
believe.
we needed, our job as a board, that's you on management to figure out
Correct.
personnel. Our job as a board is to cover our liability and to get that communication to our residents.
Well,
So
and the
that's
hours of
mine
operation
as
also
one
is your
request.
responsibility, so I just wanna make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
The second item is with Island Village coming on board, the pool that they're having put in there for consistency. Do we have confirmation that they will not have a lifeguard there?
It'll be managed by CROA.
From the beginning, from the very, very
It's a
beginning,
CROA item. They're turning it over to us before it opens.
before it opens?
So it'll be us.
Okay, as long as that's not a stipulation, cool.
Okay. May I call the vote?
Are you doing both CROA and CJC together? or
We
is
have a
it-
motion for
Just
CROA.
CROA, okay.
Let's just do CROA, and then we'll do the motion for CJC. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, next item, motion to approve the 2020 CJC budget with gross revenue and expenditures of $1,628,670. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Perfect. Any conversation? Call the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 4, rather than me read it, may we do what Jackson likes to call a consent agenda and do 4A through J. What we haven't done in here is Spring Park, both of theirs, and there's
Spring
one
Lake.
more, right?
Spring Lake.
I'm sorry, I meant Spring Lake.
In Parkview.
Spring Lake and Parkview, and those are both having follow-up items,
Yes.
which we will do. I don't think there's any, I mean, I went to all the meetings and everything, I don't think there's any issues with all of these at all, so it is the recommendation of,
I have one question.
yes, go ahead.
And I'm not sure which letter it is on here, but I do know that on a handful of service areas, we removed legal. And I think I brought this up to you briefly. I don't know if I fully understood the reason why, but we had legal line items that we had a couple $1,000s here and there. And for next year, we put $0, but we all know, that is public knowledge, that there are legal expenses coming up. So what's the reasoning?
They have there are 3 primary areas that have a contingent liability. It is being funded by CROA, and so they don't have an expense, they have a contingent liability that is waiting the finalization of the legal actions.
So they'll get hit with the bill later on.
Yes, and they are aware of that.
Well, just to clarify,
Or
just a little,
possibly not.
just to clarify, the reason it's contingent liability is that if we are successful in a negotiation or in the actual litigation, there would be fees returned to CROA for legal, which would then be part of the settlement and the distribution back. So the thought was, rather than assess homeowners right now for something that might be returned to them in a year or two, it was better to not assess them for that, let CROA foot that bill initially, and then we'll see what happens when we get the settlement. Does that make sense?
But is it wise to turn around, and I'm not saying separate situations that we do know are going on legally. I'm saying we went from, for example, $4,000 or $7,000 in these budgets for service areas to zero. Not a single penny they're putting in there. So is that, are we moving numbers around to make things work? Or
Do we have, let me follow up. Do we have legal in the other service areas that are not related? I don't think we do.
You had like,
But we have annual.
well, you have
every
like
year.
600.
Yeah, there was
Until this year.
a small
There's nominal.
amount for one of them, and then I think Spring Lake has a small line item. But in general, they didn't have legal line
in the
items. It was mostly
meetings-
the three construction defect service areas that have a significant
But last year's
amount.
budget, as an example, there was, I think, South Village may have had like $7,000 in their budget.
They had 4,500.
It was 48, yeah.
48.
48, and it was just the three construction litigation service areas. Those are the three.
That's what we're talking about. So it was in relation.
So let's say they had like $7,000 listed in their 2019 budget. If I went back to their 2010 budget, did they have any dollar figure there?
Most
They would have
likely,
never.
no.
Most
No.
likely no. I mean,
So
we
that
have
only
like
started
600
2 years ago.
I'd have, it's, yeah.
So
it
in the
started when
meetings
this
themselves,
began.
actually, it was actually discussed why legal was at zero form and stuff like that. Very few of them have legal issues. One of them had like 600 because there were a couple of small.
Because there was
My
not a
recollection
clothing
from
things that we
last
thought we
year,
would
at
probably
this
have
point
to
last year,
contrast.
I raised the question of legal in those three service areas, and I asked that it be included, remember Susanna, because we weren't sure at that point how we were going forward. We hadn't embarked on litigation, we were just doing investigation. I recall that being the first time that there was any legal amount in any service area's budget. So
I didn't notice that. Okay.
that's my recollection. I could be wrong, but I think the point was really to just make sure that these owners were not paying something that might turn out to be a wash at the end, and that was all. If there's a placeholder needed, I suppose you could put it in, but there's enough going on that I feel like that's just making it more complicated than we need to, but that's
Yeah,
my
just-
view.
I have a hard time just betting on that, that's all.
To your point, Jackson, after we talked about that, we did put out a communication to all the owners in a letter and email talking, when the board sent their letter to the homeowners, it said there will be a legal line in your budget this coming year for this reason. So, and that item was used towards legal expenses.
And just so you know, when I was on the board before, we never had a legal,
Yeah, I just, I
line
don't,
item.
I guess my concern was just that we did have one, and then we dropped it to zero based on that, you know, it just,
But we
for
have-
security, for me, if it was me individually, I'd be setting a couple dollars aside for that type of a thing, not knowing the outcome yet.
And we had a meeting, for example, with Paul Terry and all the groups, and went through this in quite a bit of detail.
And we had a
Well, also
pro
say
board
this-
workshop too, went through
Well,
each
yeah,
one.
Yeah,
on that
the
stuff.
South
I never got an
Village
answer.
Service Area, which has its own service area committee, was involved in those discussions. I think if they had wanted us to include that, they had that opportunity to make that comment. They did not, as I recall. The other two service areas don't have service area committees, which is unfortunate. But, I mean, it's a legitimate question, should owners be setting money aside? Well, if you live in a service area property, maybe you should, maybe that would be prudent financially, but I'm not sure that we as a board should be telling them to do that when we're actually trying to buffer them a little bit in this litigation process, at least for this year. I mean, it may be different in a year.
I guess my biggest concern is I will have concern if we have to push a special assessment on those areas in the future because of this.
Well, I can tell you that all of them are already fully aware, because I've attended all of the
Yes.
meetings. They are fully aware of what's happening, 100%.
I think of all the challenges we've got with service areas, with roofing and gutters and landscaping and so on. Thank you, Susanna, for all that you have been doing and the efforts that you're making. I'm going to say again, because I don't have to put $1 in the jar for this. Service areas are the next tsunami coming into Celebration. They are going to be a challenge. The expectations of owners and the reality of 20-plus-year-old buildings are coming into conflict now. And every service owner area should be aware, they should read their documents, they should form a service area committee, they should come to the meetings, they should look at these documents, they should do the kind of research that they need to do. This is not going to be easy.
Okay. Can I call the vote?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, stay there, young lady. Next,
We got-
motion
we
to
got
transfer
5, 6, 7 still.
$30,000 of excess operating funds to replacement reserve funds
Oh,
for
yes.
Oak Pound Townhome Service Area. This is a case where they were overfunded in one area and just moving it to the other area. I think it's pretty straightforward. It was discussed with them. Actually, I need
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second. Second is Kevin. Any comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Artisan Park budget. Jackson, anything of relevance there?
It is, the budget was vetted through the Finance Committee at Artisan Park. They held meetings. The Artisan Park Committee voted to approve the revenue, or to approve the budget. The assessment went up by $2.25 a home per year, or per month, and that was within the 2% guideline that CROA has taken for our budgets.
Yeah, I read it yesterday. It looked like a pretty Me Too straightforward budget. Any comments from anyone on the board?
Do we have a motion in a second?
Do we have a motion?
For this one, no.
Not for this one.
Okay, yeah.
So Jackson and Vanessa will be the second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. David leaves the room, we fly. Okay, why don't we do a motion to approve Delta Engineering for water intrusion assessment, blah, blah, blah.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay, why don't you walk us through it?
Okay, so this is something that just recently came up. Of the 3 service areas that are having water intrusion from the roof construction defect case, there are a handful that have had repeated leaks, and they're in different locations, sometimes in the same area. Homeowners are just getting so frustrated. And so we talked to the lawyers, and the recommendation was to get Delta, who did the report, their engineering, and they specialize in roofs, to come out, do an assessment. They get an infrared gun out, they take a look at, everything, and try to figure out what is causing the leak, where it's coming from. And they also bring, it can be a construction company or a roofing company to do demo, maybe, to get in the walls and look and put it back together, and just try to get to the determination so that these people can have peace of mind and not, be scared every time it rains, so.
Couple questions. This is part of our litigation. I don't recall, and I'm trying to think carefully about what I can say and can't say. I don't recall this conversation in our executive session. Did I miss it?
It was a
No.
separate.
This is new.
It was
Okay.
a separate one, right?
Yes, this
'cause you
came
did
up
reach-
since that time.
You did reach out to them to find out what we should do, and that's when
Yes.
they said this. Yeah, that was
Yes. In fact, we had a conference call with the owner, too. And this
This
was
is a
the.
single unit?
Can I add to that too, though, that this is, to have an actual assessment done on this is gonna be key, because there's possibilities that the water may be intruding in other areas than just the roof, and it needs to be identified, so they need to know where it's coming from.
And they signed off on it. I saw where the sign-off was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And this info will go to Paul Terry.
Yes.
He's
He's already signed off on it. He's already signed off on it.
All right,
He's the attorney.
Does he want?
So we're saying,
Are we going back to Paul, excuse me, Kim, just follow up on this one thing, are we going back to him then before we do repairs and make sure he understands?
I think we have to, because if it's the chimney,
Yeah.
for example, and I'm not a roofing
Or a
expert, so I have
parapet
no
wall.
idea what it is. That's why we need to hire them. But if it's not the roof, there's even more challenges that we'll have to address. Because the governing document states something, or service area, some are homeowner expenses, so.
just knowing what I know with Town Center and everything that we're going through there, Is $5,000, this is, you're saying it's one unit, and 5,000 will go ahead and take it as it currently sits, rip through it, find out what's going on, and close it up? Or are we going to look like we look like in Town Center, which is patched walls, duct tape that's been up for years, things like that? What's the end result after they get the discovery they need?
Well, the goal is to find out what the problem is. So they're going to have another company there with them that's going to open it up and put it back together. So there will be an additional cost of whatever that contractor is charging to do all that work. The engineer is strictly there to assess the situation, figure out what the cause is. Now, again, like Steve said, if it becomes a situation where it's the homeowner's responsibility, then, that falls to them, and we'll work with them to figure out, how we close it up.
Let me rephrase if I may.
Uh-huh.
So the $5,000 is for the engineer to come in, rip it apart, find out what he needs to find. It might be
Yes.
this big, it might be the whole width of the building.
Yes.
What are we going to do? How are we planning for the repair cost in the meantime, so we don't look like Town Center, which is duct taped over
I think the
for
answer
years?
will be, we don't know, because it has to
As
be
long as we know that.
communicated to
Right.
the lawyer, and
There's a lot more than $5,000 that's most likely
Right.
going to come after.
I would say the first step is to find out what he has to say, and he'll send us a report that this is what we think is going on, and then we'll take it to the next step. This particular unit already has a tarp
But the
in
next
some
step here
areas.
will be going to the lawyer and getting
Yes,
legal
of
feedback.
course,
I mean,
always.
I'm a little concerned that's coming out of replacement reserve, because ultimately, this may be part of our legal expense, just as the original Delta report was. Can you tell me why you wanted it out of this particular account?
We were treating this like we do the prior legal expenses that we've had, which, roof repairs that have come out of reserves, not legal. The
But
roof
this is not a
repairs,
roof repair.
Yeah.
This is an assessment for legal.
investigative.
I would ask that the motion be amended, and that the funds come out of, what account were we using for the legal? Is it just operating?
But this doesn't say it's for legal.
It may
though.
not be. We won't
It
know.
may be just to see if we have to fix a leak and not to do this.
You could-
Oh, we're not doing this for
No,
legal.
you could approve it as it is now, and then if it becomes part of legal,
We
you
can
could
change it.
do an adjustment.
I would do the
But
opposite.
if this becomes a homeowner issue, then.
Then
right,
it's not
going
us
to
at all.
legal
Just money, I guess.
I would take it out of replacement reserves, but you could amend the motion to say that once we get the feedback, we will figure out if it's part of the legal. At the end of the,
Does that look questionable down the road? Should we be operating?
So close.
Should we come out of operating and then change?
What is it, $20?
That's a buck.
Okay.
go ahead, Kevin.
I don't know legal, what legal would look at it. Maybe we have to go through Angus to see what's the best account to take it out of right now for his argument down the road.
I'm not
This is
sure he's
the
going to care.
opposing-
I'm not sure he's going to care. He might. I'm just worried that we put it now in replacement reserve, then we forget about it, and we never come back to it, and it's really not a replacement reserve for this part of the work. This is literally just looking to see what the damage is. The replacement reserve should be the repairs that are done post the investigation.
Okay, let's take it out
So-
of,
so
let's take
where-
it out of the
okay.
same fund we're using for legal, and then, once we get the report, determine where it should be allocated based upon
I
the
would,
report.
I would approve that. I mean, I would. be in
Who
support.
actually made the
You
motion?
made the motion.
Amend the motion.
Okay, I'll amend the motion. Who was it, whoever it
And I'll
was?
second the
Okay.
amendment.
I don't remember what-
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect.
That makes sense.
Charter Review Task Force. Vanessa.
Actually, I'm going to call up our chairperson. Thank you again, Gary, for all the hard work of the committee, and Eileen, I see one of our task force members here, so thank you.
And I'm going to try to hold you to about 10 minutes.
Right.
I don't think it'll take that long.
You should be fine.
Well, there's an issue, but I think I have two questions. Gary Hudspeth, 1471, Chairman for the Charter Review Task Force. Your question is specifically about the voting plan, so I'll address that one first. As Eileen alluded to, as of our meeting starting tomorrow, we have approximately 47 issues that will be on the ballot. After tomorrow night's meeting, it could be 50, 51. There are quite a few administrative corrections that are not counted because they're not on the ballot. But we could have in the vicinity of 50 items on the ballot. Over the last month, we've talked to the lawyer about, according to Florida statutes, we will supply by mail a accounting of the language being inserted by underline and the language being stricken from the document by strikeout. You saw the same thing when you voted for constitutional amendments in the state of Florida last year. That will allow us to have a ballot of just a summary of each change, maybe 1 or 2 sentences per change, per amendment, that reflects the intent of the amendment with a reference to the actual paragraph number in the document, which will then refer to you back to the mailing that you got earlier in January, or go online to the Celebration website where you can read the entire document with all the changes. So then, now we have a ballot of approximately 4 pages long with a summary for each one. It is our intent, because we think they're all well-discussed and of the nature that they needed to be made, with several handfuls of initiatives by homeowners, such as the RFP process, term limits for the board members, things that were brought to us by the community that felt like it needed to be changed. It's our feeling that they should all be voted on as one document, one vote, either all up or all down. Are there controversial issues? Maybe a couple, but it depends on how you see things. We think they're all positive issues that need to be corrected, either to be in compliance with Florida statute, or this is what the homeowners want to do, or to promote an efficiency by the management staff and the board. These are things that need to be corrected to make sure we are in line with our current policy. So that's why we think they're all affirmative, positive issues that should all be voted on with one vote. Is that what you want to talk about?
The issue, as I remember from last week's meeting, is you have to have so many votes for an item to pass. And refresh, okay, before he refreshes, so you could put it up as one block item, and the board, let's just keep it at 50 for a nice round number. The board could say, we endorse all 50 and put the whole 50 up as one item, yes or no, or you could do 50 individual items. And the fear that we had last week is ballot exhaustion will take over, and a lot of items, people will just say, I voted for the first 3 items, I like these 2, and I'm done. And so the feeling was we really probably should consider, as a board, saying it would be best to do a block vote, saying all 50 of them, yes or no, and refresh us on the numbers that have to vote and how many have to say affirmative.
According to the current bylaws, which has been in place since 2011, you need an affirmative minimum threshold vote, which is 10% affirmative votes of the population. There are 4,321 votes. So 10% of that would be 431, plus or minus a few in good standing, and have to be affirmative, 431 affirmative votes. Plus, on top of that, they must be the majority of the votes cast. So if you have 431 affirmative votes and 440 people voted, certainly the majority in the affirmative side is going to be 431. Where could you lose? If, I don't have it in front of me, but if 900 people vote and the majority of those are negative, even though you have 431 affirmative minimum threshold votes, the majority could be negative. So we want as many people to vote as possible. And in the past 9 years, our average election votes have been 939 over all the elections. So that's a great number. Good participation. We'd love more. But 431 or approximately, please know that those numbers are not exact.
Mm-hmm. And that's fine. So we have consciously tied this whole thing to doing the same voting that we vote for directors, because people are just used to voting that time of year.
I think really
Go
quick,
ahead.
just to draw a more of a visual picture as to why it's important to do one vote, I think, for instance, you talked about voter exhaustion, right? they don't have to, if you give them a ballot, they don't have to vote on all of them. What happens if we don't even get 400 and some odd for that particular item that, it may be a very simple one, but they're like, I have no idea why I would be doing this, so people just don't vote. We really need them to check a box, yes or no. We want it to be yes, and the task force has been directed to make sure that you're making changes that are palatable. We don't want to make any big revelation, we don't need to make any big statements. We want to make sure that the changes that are being made are those that are, it's a compromise on
These are
those
consensus
issues.
items.
Yes.
Yeah.
Things that you just come up with something that, okay, well, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm okay with this. Or, while I really agree with this, I wish it was more extreme, but I'm okay because they're dealing with it. So I think it's important that, because there's so many items, we just have a simple up or down. So as a liaison, I'm actually going to advocate on behalf of that.
Vanessa's right. A blank vote is the same as a no vote. And voter fatigue, by looking at 4 pages of summaries, could concur. The other reason we would like to do a up or down vote on the entire package is if the board does this, you lend your consensus to that as speaking with one voice.
Gary, could you,
Yes, sir.
because the elections are coming up for the board, could you go over just those changes publicly now and explain how those would work, the term of years? Is there a stagger now? Some are going to be 3, some are going to be 2-year terms. How that's going to work?
Without taking up too much time.
It wouldn't
it's-
take effect for this current election. It
No,
would be
yes.
for the 20.
Yeah, because it'll be voted in.
You're gonna be electing your
So it'll be
directors at the same
it'll be
time you're doing this. So
simultaneous.
the directors will be appointed when the yes or the no is.
It'll be simultaneous.
It'll be
Your term
simultaneous.
limit.
It'll be simultaneous.
Yeah, the term limit.
Term limits will be affected, but the actual voting.
What the term limit is on the new one is there are 4 people up for election. The leading 2 vote getters would get a 3-year term. Candidates 3 and 4 would get a 2-year term, and then you've got 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. People serve 3-year terms instead of 2. They can serve 2 3-year terms in their life. Past service doesn't count, so this is a prospective change only. The idea being from the charter task force was that 6 years is a good time, 3 years is a long time. To be on the board, we all know that, and you build rotation.
Effectively.
My question comes up, just to follow up with that, excuse me, David, but if you have a board candidate that gets the top, is in the top 2, so they're the 3-year term.
Yes.
What happens if they say, well, I can't do 3, I'll do 2, and then what is the provision, what would happen then with that person? If they're saying, no, I'll do 2, but not 3?
As per the current bylaws, which doesn't really significantly change, a board member can resign anytime he wants to.
So they would resign totally, and then you just keep moving down the list?
The board would
No.
appoint.
No, well, the current bylaws say you can appoint, the board may appoint someone
Yeah.
if there's not a quorum. But the board is not required to appoint
Right.
someone.
Yeah, we understand that.
You could
So-
wait till the next election, since we have an election every
So
year,
there's no
to
provision
fulfill
for
that.
somebody that says, well, I can't do 3, but I'll do 2, for people to swap around?
They can just step down
Right.
2 years.
No, they can just resign.
Just resign.
And
Okay.
then you have a vacancy.
Gary, isn't it written though that the appointed position fills out the remainder of that term until that next election?
Yes.
Yes, if you
Not
do
that they just
choose,
fill in.
if you do choose to appoint someone, they only fill out the remainder of the term,
Right.
and then someone runs again. That person doesn't have to run again, but
So there's no provision that you have to go down the list of the ones that didn't make the
no,
board?
never was in the bylaws.
Right. I didn't know if we were,
Yeah, there never was anything like that in the bylaws, that you go back to the previous election and pick up the next candidate.
So
Never
that
was,
is-
and we don't intend that.
So that's a major change. You got the major change that there is a requirement for a request for proposal when the current contract expires at the end of 2021. So that's something that's going to happen in late 20 into 21. It's a 3-year term because that's what the law mandates under 720, but there's 2 renewals can be built into that, but there would be then a mandatory request for proposal at a minimum every 9 years. So that's an item. The term limits is an item. What are other major issues? Can you think of, Tom?
I think Dave, I interrupted David there. You
No,
go.
yeah, just to follow up on that, but the effective date for the proposed board changes would be, because they won't be voted in until after March 6th,
If,
or the due date.
if the amendment in the charter and bylaws is approved, it'll take effect in March 2020 after the election.
After the election,
It's
so
concurrent,
those
yeah.
terms
It's
wouldn't come into
concurrent.
effect till the following year.
No, they take effect immediately
It's concurrent with.
at the
It would
election.
only really affect the top two vote getters, right?
That's right, only the top 2 vote getters.
On this current election.
That'll be important to have in the
It's written-
description when
it's
people
it's written
apply.
up.
It's actually written in the bylaws. We plan for that transition period. And in fact, if you look at the November issue, which just came out of Celebration News, those 2 issues are in the summary.
It does present a challenge, though, that David's, I think, alluding to, because when we send out the ballots, we do say you're voting for 4 candidates for 2 years. So we can't change that on this wording because the
it's
new
not
one hasn't
approved.
been approved yet.
I think you could just say you're voting for 4 candidates.
Yes.
I was gonna say, make it more nebulous.
That's
Just
what,
make it
and that's
more
what, and that's what I had said, we had internal emails regarding the article, and in that I just said, make it generic, as generic as possible, because you're actually discussing it in the voting.
But there should be some sort of communication that residents understand that the top 2 vote getters are going to be
There's
an
gonna be,
additional
we
year.
have talked about, there's gonna be communication
Yes.
galore.
It's already started in the November issue of Celebration News. It'll be explained again in the December issue, which I just submitted to JR. And come the January, February issues, you're going to see a complete explanation of those issues for people who read
Okay,
Celebration News.
so the real purpose here was to talk about it at all.
So, a question on that,
Oh.
on the voting. You know, I think you had raised last week, I think, about a question about a poison pill.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, there's some controversies out there. So what I wonder about is a voting option that would say, I approve all, or I choose to go through each of them, and knowing that there will be survey exhaustion or ballot exhaustion.
I
Well,
don't
then
think
you
we can
run
do
the,
that under
you run the problem of not getting the affirmative minimum threshold,
Right,
which
yeah.
is approximately 431 votes.
It would be, in a perfect world, we might be able to do it. In an imperfect world that we live in, probably not. Let me just circle back to why we've discussed this single vote. You've heard some good reasons. The entire philosophy of the task force was to find consensus, as Vanessa said. There may be radical changes needed in town, there may be radical changes desired in town. The task force was not a radical group by design. You remember that we all collaborated to pick the members of the task force. We did a hell of a job. And, we got really great people, thank you very much. But at the work that they have done, oh, thank God, I almost said it. The work that they have done leads me to believe that what we've got is an acceptable package that people can look at and say, on balance, I'm okay with this and I can vote yes. And that was the goal. If we had broken these out separately, I think we would have turf wars over certain items, and we would tend to create more discord, more controversy in ways that we didn't need to do because we're just not at that point yet. So our goal was to come to the middle on everything, and that's why I think it's safe to do this kind of an approach.
Has the task force looked at saying, let's split it between 4 different votes? These are 10 items regarding board operation. These are 10 items regarding,
Yes.
and to make it only 5 votes total, something like
If
that.
you had read October issue of Celebration News and this month, you'll see that we are proposing to break the amendments into 3 categories, and that is the amendments to be compliant with Florida statutes. That's a given.
You have to.
We have to do this. Amendments initiated by homeowners, which puts everyone has an opinion. These are the ones that came up from the community. These are important. And the final one is amendments for CROA efficiency. These are items that are brought to us by the board themselves as well as the staff to align the current policy with the actual governing documents. So these are the three
votes.
categories.
It's
Well,
not one
three-
vote.
It's three categories.
Yes, we're not asking for 3 votes, these are 3
Because
categories.
Kevin
to-
was asking a different question,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
whether
Well,
you thought about
but
3
his
votes.
top, but I think, not to put words in your mouth, but if you were going to do something like that, you could make these as yes or no votes, but I think.
trying
you-
to
You're in between what David is
But,
saying
but I
and what.
think I think you fall into the same challenge
Yes.
of
I'd
what
rather-
happens if they don't check it? Then we have something that is really vital that we needed
I'd
to make
rather-
sure gets
I'd rather
through.
not. The reason we've broken these 3 categories, because it made sense to help people understand how the different topics came into being for the task force.
I understand, I'm
to
saying
change.
votes, not categories. I'm
Yeah.
saying make each category a vote, not, because you're saying one vote.
Yeah.
There's one check yes, check no.
For the entire
What I'm
package.
trying to see is split between 1 and 50 of how do you summarize to have perhaps
Well, I
3
think
votes,
if you
and I'm
looked at
hearing what you're saying.
if you looked at the actual proposals, 50 of them, you'd see they all make sense. They're all legitimate. They have a
Oh,
good
I'm not
reason.
questioning that.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning that. I'm trying
Yeah.
to prevent voter fatigue, and I'm trying to
Well-
give people more than just
I think
one
that-
box to
Yeah,
check.
I think that the danger, Kevin, with 3 votes versus 1 is just the possibility, the theoretical possibility that people would vote yes on the administrative items, vote no on, let's say, the owner items. And we would find ourselves with conflicting language or gaps in what we're doing because the package that Gary and the team have put together is an integrated
dependent on
package.
each other.
It's
I think that's the
cohesive,
problem.
so you'd have a
Yes.
change in one area of the charter, but not in the other.
Because we did discuss it,
Yeah.
what you talked about.
So if we do vote for all, we are taking a chance that it would not be approved. We're taking a chance.
Yes.
And so,
small chance.
a slim chance, but we're taking a chance. We're saying to the residents, we've gone through this neutral, exhaustive, reasoned process. So please trust us and vote yes. That's the message.
Well, that's also why we're publicizing
Right.
in Celebration
Our hope
News
isn't
what we're
just
doing.
trust us, our hope is that you've actually been following it.
The consequence of it not succeeding is, okay, then we just put forward the statute ones later. We can do that in April, July, we can do that anytime. Just put forward, those that are required by statute, bring us in compliance, we can put those forward later.
Yeah.
Well,
We
then,
could.
we've already
Otherwise, we're not in non-compliance. If it fails, we're in non-compliance.
We've already done the homework and incurred a lot of expense from legal representation. It would make sense to take care of it in one big swoop.
I'm not disagreeing. If it doesn't
I
go
think-
forward, we still have options.
Yeah, exactly. I think what you're saying, and you're saying the same thing, just differently,
Yeah.
is because you already have everything, you've already done the due diligence. It's all done.
Exactly.
What you propose wouldn't change, but
Right.
you would want to put through, so you just vote on those 10 items that are administrative,
Yeah.
push it,
That you almost have to do.
right,
So,
separate votes
I
later.
completely
I don't wanna
understand where
go
Ms.
there.
Janice is going, but so if I have a homeowner one that I just don't agree with, I'm forced to vote yes if I want the administrative stuff.
Yeah, you
to
are.
go- The legal stuff to
You
go
are.
through.
Yes, everything goes
Or
It's a
the flip
ticket.
side of
It's a
that.
ticket.
Correct.
Right.
It's a ticket.
Yeah.
But let me remind you that we have worked for 8 months and communicated for 8 months
Right.
to make nothing so controversial that it would cause a homeowner to feel that way. And I would just invite people to read the voluminous information that's out there and the links, and to see the historical record that's been created, so that they know that there's nothing that's being done that's like slipping something under.
At the end of the day, people are gonna ask.
Oh,
People are gonna ask, what does the board want? And we need to give a recommendation once.
Well, you're gonna have the forum where there could be questions that maybe Gary or board members or staff could answer
No.
directly related to
now, to help us,
Wait.
to help us
the
assure
beginning of the day.
passage, you recall in the interim reports, Kathy, co-chairman, and I have put forth a plan to publicize this. Part of this is to get people to read Celebration News. We're going to mail out the entire change in January, so everybody knows what's there. As more Celebration News issues are coming out, you're going to see more and more detail about the proposals that we've for the amendments. We've also scoured the internet and looked at research for how do you get the vote out? We've all experienced this in local, state, and national elections, but one of those is to do something out of the box. And we've created a proposal to make some short 1.5 minute videos to post on the Celebration website. They're like public service announcements, to get people interested, to go to the website, to look at the changes, and then help explain them come January and February. To do that, we need to take some money out of our
Right.
a budget that we've allotted.
So this is what I want to do, because I want to get to one more topic at least. We've had a briefing on this. If the board wants to think about it a little, we've got a board meeting on November 20th. We can finalize it then, we can approve the funds, one with the other. But the three liaisons, being Vanessa, Jackson, and myself, are recommending we go with one vote, because it's probably our least risky way of trying to get this passed.
We've done all this work and we've publicized this, and we will in the future, but if the board now decides to separate part of this and move it to a later date, to me, the optics is there's something wrong and you want to think about it. Why are they pushing this off to the side? I would rather do it all now, after all the work we've done.
Right,
Show support
That makes
of the
sense.
To show
the task
support.
force.
that makes sense.
So I would make a motion, since it's on our agenda, I would make a motion that we take the charter amendments as a single yes or no item on the ballot.
I'd second that.
Okay, any last comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
If we don't, we're going to have to delay our production schedule if you don't talk to us about using part of our budget,
Yeah, about the
videos.
videos, but Mike, you had what was your question regarding? Okay.
Come on.
I'll repeat it, go ahead. It's Mike Jackson from Sycamore. Go ahead, Mike.
So first, to get this passed or the campaign for what's a video or anything else, I would suggest the board needs to endorse it, obviously. That's very obvious. The other thing you can do is get endorsement from residents in the community. So you have a number of residents, get people to start signing on and start posting. These people support the passage positively of this. If you get some formal and informal leaders in the community that sign on early, and people start to see that, they'll rely on a lot of people for real people. They won't do the work themselves, but they see a name out there they know, they will do it. The other thing.
So getting community advocates ahead of time.
Community advocates, endorsers.
Endorsing our community advocates.
Have people sign up and have a campaign and say, if you reviewed this and you think it's a good thing for the community, sign here, let us use your name.
On that one specific item, what we have talked about is having people go to celebrators, have people go to lifelong events, coordinating that with the foundation so we can do that. So
PTA,
we've
SAC.
talked about getting people out to a lot of different things. Each board member going to people that they know to really kind of do that.
That was part of our plan.
One other quick thing. The comments about the ballot for the election and going generic, I think that's a bad idea. I'll tell you why. You're just not giving the full story to people. I don't think you should go generic and try to not lay out the implications of what's happening here. Very simply, you can say, this is a vote for 4 people for 2 years, and then it can be footnoted with an asterisk that says, in the event the charter resolution you're also voting on is passed, the top 2 vote getters in this group will be a 3-year term as part of the transition plan.
So
That's
just-
to do full disclosure, transparency.
Actually,
So just
that will
original-
actually be on the ballot.
Well, it was not about that.
But we're talking, no, your ballot, not our ballot. So he's saying change our ballot, which
Yeah.
probably makes sense, and I think we ought to review it.
Your your
Because I want
asterisk
to go
is gonna be-
to, the next item I wanted to go to was the ballot item. I know you got a budget item. How much money were we talking about? Because I'm trying to roll
Was it
here with a couple of.
4,500 for 8 videos.
How much?
4,500 out of our current
It's in
budget.
your budget.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It is, I got the amount, you still,
Okay.
was it?
It
so
was,
50
it
about
was
50
less than $14,000.
Yeah,
Not counting any future.
In the budget you
Right.
have left,
In-
but the videos were 4,500.
if we do that, there's still enough
Do you-
money.
Do you have enough for mailings and future legal fees?
Well,
That's part of next year's budget.
Yeah.
For the mailings.
yeah.
Because the mailings
Yeah.
will go out.
So we do have the money in the budget for.
No, it's not. We have a budget. It's not next year's budget. We
But
have
if
a
you're talking
budget.
about
No.
a
Talking
mailing
about
now
something
and then a
else.
mailing again, then.
Yes.
No,
it's
we're
still-
talking about the the budget that you provided for the Charter Review Task Force.
25,000.
Exactly. But I assumed that was going to carry us through the end of the election, not, which
Because you have to
includes
send the
March.
mailing out.
So it's in the current budget. So if we take out 4,500 for this, do you still have enough for mailings in January and February?
So any money that you don't
Legal
spend
fees.
goes into surplus, and surplus can be utilized next year also.
We're fine.
Okay.
We have the money in the budget.
You had a budget,
Yeah.
this is within the budget, and this is how you want to do it. I say let the task force go. I don't think we need to debate this at the board
All
level.
right.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay, let's go to the next item, because this had been brought up, so I think it's worthy.
You're good, thank you.
Thank
Brian,
you.
can I just ask real quick, I know covenant letters are time sensitive when it comes to November and December. The forums for the election aren't until February. So we have some time to discuss that. A suggestion to move the covenant letter conversations, unless you want to do both and just go longer.
We'll go a little longer, at least. Gerald, you want to read your comment? Let Gerald read his comment, I promise we will, and then we're going to go to CCS. Well, we'll get through the covenants, and then we'll go to CCS.
What are we talking, we're doing covenants first? Or not?
You know,
We're gonna do this one first.
we're gonna do the, election
Okay.
form.
Gerald Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. I attended the last charter review roundtable. Unsolicited by me, the other people at the table started discussing the upcoming election and the candidates forum. They made a number of major points summarized below. 1, CCMC should help with logistics only and not content. The community should have major input into question formulation. The board should start soliciting this information now and not wait till a week or two before the candidates forum. There should be hard and perceptive questions only, not soft platitude questions.
I got a point just to add to that. I think you had some good points, and what I noticed at the last election, I was sitting right over here, and I watched an individual go up there where the questions were in a basket. I saw somebody go up there by themselves, they went through, and they started sifting through the questions, then found one and put that one on the bottom.
Can you be very clear about this? Was not
It was
any
an-
of the
it was a-
CCNC
it was
management
a-
staff that
It was
did
a
that.
resident.
It was a resident, I'm sorry, it was nobody in management, and so this person was up there sifting through, took a question that they were reading on the top, stuck it on the bottom, put their question on top. So what I suggested to Steve, I mentioned this to him last year, was that we have a lockbox. And you put the questions in a lockbox and don't allow people to go up there and start reading the questions and maybe taking one out and not, making sure it doesn't get asked. I think we need a lockbox, then let the moderator, whoever it is, go through the questions or pull the questions or whatever it is, and do it that way, because I don't like what I saw up there.
Okay.
That was very unprofessional.
In the interest of time, I wanted Gerald to read that. I think we need to fix the process, because what he described, I saw too. And it was a process where I sat here and I said, this is not good.
And it was just to be clear,
It was a resident, not a CC employee at all. I think it would be good for us maybe to, since we're managing several time issues here, to touch on this a little more at the next board meeting about, let's have the process, because I would rather have people in the community. We got the Friday Flash, let's just ask for questions, let it come in, let's talk about who should be the moderator. None of the prospective board members should be reading questions in advance. The harder the questions, I actually think that's intelligent. So get it, have a screening process. I think the comment is spot on. Does any board member want to argue with that?
No.
So we're going to have that on the board agenda for our November 20th meeting. Management, what I'd like to do at that meeting is sit there and say, how has the process worked as historically? How do you pick the moderator? How do we get the questions? Because we know that with the athletic fields going on, Island Village, all the other things here, money involved, this is important. So I very much agree with it, and I appreciate the question.
We do have an
We have
election
a
committee,
workshop.
do we not?
We have a workshop on the 18th still, unless you want to cancel.
You want to do the workshop on the 18th?
That's another
Better.
topic.
Pardon?
That's another topic. Let me see. Do we have an election committee, though?
No, not really. We have the count, we have just
You have the
PJ
people that
does a
are counters.
count,
It's
but
just
that's
the count,
different. It's
yeah.
just that, yeah.
Maybe we need to,
But the board approves.
into that more.
It's
PJ.
better as a workshop agenda, I think.
yeah, okay.
Allows for more dialogue with the residents.
You're right, we do on the 18th.
Because once
Okay,
you get
let's
in the
put
board
this on the
meeting,
November
no
18th
resident
workshop
comments.
to actually let's make it like topic number 1 so we actually get to it and do it. Covenants letters. Vanessa.
Okay, so
Insurance renewal will push to November 18th.
I guess my concern, our last meeting, the board had approved the going forward with doing covenants letters in timeframe when we normally don't. Can you please clarify what we did last year, or what we didn't do last year?
So it's been for the past several years
Right.
that we do have a covenants meeting in November, and we do have one scheduled, Gary can correct me, 18th, I believe. I could be wrong on the
It's okay.
date, but it's,
It's
we do not complete covenants in December.
Okay.
Just because
Holiday.
that would be sending somebody a fine letter, and the way the schedule works out right now, we would have to do it the week before Christmas. And that's pretty, yeah,
It's a little aggressive.
because it's
Yeah.
required to be a minimum of 14 days after the board meeting.
Correct.
And
So-
so the way it works out, it would be the week before Christmas.
Okay, so before we had said our policy, we're good with adjusting it and go ahead and just continue through the process. We want to make sure that we are not going to break with the protocol we have had the past couple of years. So we do not want to have those sent out.
I know the one thing that the committee did want was we never had a meeting in January previously. They do want to have a covenants meeting in January versus waiting until February for the first covenants. That's what the committee was pushing for.
Okay.
So we never had them in December and January. So they're pushing just to add one to January. December, I really don't think anybody wants.
I don't think so.
I mean, I know residents don't want it,
So
so,
keep November,
yes,
skip December as historically we have.
correct. And then
add
schedule one for January,
which
yes.
Historically, we have not, but I believe that's good for a couple of reasons. And one, I'll say, we just talked about the election. You want those people to be in compliance at the same time.
Correct, and January, I mean, we start back up on regular inspections mid-January. The meeting would be 20th or around then, so we're not talking the beginning, we're talking the very
Towards
end
the
of
end of
January,
Skip
yes.
December and January.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm
Okay.
good
Support
with,
that.
So we're,
Yeah.
we're good with that?
Yeah,
Everybody's
is
good
there
with that?
any-
Let me get a vote, just because there was a vote last time.
yes.
Okay.
So I motion to not have a meeting in December, but resume in January.
For the
Second.
governance committee. And we
For
got a
covenants.
second.
For covenants, so.
Yeah.
For covenants, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We need 3 minutes.
And then we'll start CCing us.
And poor Laura has to write down her motions.
And if you just came in